So, why does it darken like that? A couple days ago, I came upon the very unfortunate discovery that I have no sauerkraut. No finished non-canned sauerkraut. Like, I don't have any fresh fermented sauerkraut. And it made me really sad. So, I do have this beet kraut that we made together in my last Ferment in February video, but it's still fermenting. And that half gallon is not going to last me very long. So, looking down the pike, I'm realizing I need to ferment some more. However, the one that I want to make so bad is curtido. I don't have what I need to make curtido. I don't have carrots. I don't have jalapenos. So we're going to make something up. You ready to invent something with me? I do, however, have a lot of cabbage. So I'm going to make with you guys one of my favorite ferments. I have a lot of favorite ferments. I've yet to come across very many ferments that I do not enjoy. But one of my favorite ferments comes out of a book called Ferment Your Vegetables. Actually, let me get that. This is one of my favorite books. This is one of my favorite fermenting recipe books. However, last time I went to find it on Amazon, I could not find it. So if I can find it on there, I will link it for you guys. If not, if you ever see this book, pick it up. The only thing I was able to find on Amazon was used copies, so I don't know if it went out of print or what the dealio with it is. At any rate, the dealio for me is I couldn't find it. We're gonna make this recipe right here, almost exactly. We'll see. I'm gonna make however much I want. I think this recipe makes a quart-sized jar, but I'm kind of want more like a half gallon. So we're just gonna weigh stuff out and make the appropriate measurements for it. For reference, the recipe calls for 1.5 pounds of green cabbage, half a pound of red cabbage, 4 teaspoons of kosher salt, 1 teaspoon of cumin seeds, 2 teaspoons of mustard seed, and 3 juniper berries. Let's get to making however much we feel like making, shall we? I really want to make 2 recipes today, at least as far as sauerkrauts go, one spicy, one not spicy. So I'm kind of gonna completely wing it as far as the ratios between red cabbage and green cabbage. I'm just gonna cut this up and try and do at least add that much as green cabbage because I want to save the rest to make something a little spicy. And since I am going off of the recipe and not like actually keeping the recipe ratios, I need to make sure that I weigh my cabbage so that I get the correct ratio of salt. And that's just a 2% ratio. 2% of the weight of whatever your vegetable ingredients are, you add as salt. You're gonna want, what is up with this? It's so tangled. Like if you have 1,000 grams of cabbage, you're gonna add 20 grams of salt. So that's kind of the basic ratio. And I weigh in grams because it is easier. So much easier. Pig food. And I don't have any other purpose for this red cabbage specifically, so that's why I'm just, however much of it I have, that is how much I'm gonna use. And that's the cool thing about fermentation also, is that it's just open for interpretation. You can make whatever you want. It might taste a little better one way, a little worse the other way, but no matter what, as long as you cut out the oxygen, add the right amount of salt, in the end, it's gonna taste good. So we're being a little inventive today. This bowl's not gonna be big enough. I can already tell. Reserve my right to change my mind at any point in any video, so I've already changed my mind. And we're gonna make a third recipe with just some red cabbage kraut because I've never made it. I've been fermenting for 10 years and I have never once have I ever made a straight red cabbage kraut. Never once. So we're about to change that. We got 544. It's almost perfect. Half and half. 1125. So we're over by what, 15 grams, something like that. So since we have 1,125 grams of cabbage, we need to add in 22 to 23 grams of salt. So I'm not gonna explain the math. might seem excessive. If you cut down on the salt without substituting for a starter culture, you're not gonna get good results. Bigger bowl. This might fit in a quart-sized jar. It seems like so much. I don't know if you can tell, but it seems like so much. But if anything, I might have just the slightest hint extra, but I really think this will fit in a quart-sized jar. Mustard seed, cumin seeds. And then this recipe says to put the juniper berries in the bottom of the jar. I don't know why, but I've always done that. I don't know why it matters. Do you guys know? Are they like poisonous or something? Because I don't take them out when I'm done. When you're doing it this way, you do have to kind of squeeze it and massage it in enough to where you can see it's wet. Like you can see the sheen that's coming off of it, and you just kind of really get it mixed in good. Cover it up and set it aside for a few hours, and then you jar it up. That's how I do it. I know a lot of people like to just beat the heck out of it for like 10 minutes and then be about their merry way. That's not how I do it. So now we're gonna do just a completely plain purple cabbage sauerkraut. Gotta wait again. 427, so we'll put, you know, 9 or 10 grams. With the 2% salt ratio that I generally use with fermentation, you can go between 2 and 2.5% and still get very similar results. It'll just be a little bit saltier. I go on the lower end, so if you're following my example of the fermentation, it's better to go a little bit more than it is to go less. Because if you ferment this and you don't have enough salt in there, it's just gonna rot. And you're not gonna get good results. If you're avoiding salt and you can't wrap your brain around adding salt, too much salt to this, you can't eliminate the salt, but you can substitute about half of it for a already fermented culture. So if you have some fermented sauerkraut or something like that in your fridge, you can take a couple tablespoons per quart, between like 2 tablespoons and 4, so like, you know, right around 1/4 cup or so, 1/8 to 1/4 cup. You can cut the salt in half, but you still need salt. It is required unless you want to end up with a rotting pile of mush. I don't know if you can tell, but you know, in person there is a very visible sheen of liquid coming off of this. So I know that it's ready, it's mixed, it's mushed, it's ready to set for a couple of hours. So same thing, cover it with a cloth of some sort. If you're doing this in the summer, it's good to wrap like a giant rubber band around the rim of it just to make sure no pests get in, because sometimes, you know, if a fruit fly gets in there and sets its eggs, it's game over, it's nasty. For this one, like I said, I'm trying to get something that's spicy, but not like absolute fire. My definition and others is going to be very different in that regard. I have a very high heat tolerance, so I'm not sure what I'm going to add to it, but I think what I'm going to add is just some red pepper flakes, some onion, and garlic powder, because I don't have fresh garlic. Like I said, we're just going for kind of hot. I'm not looking to burn my face off. I just want something that's got some flavor, some heat to it that I can just, you know, add to whatever I'm cooking. Not what I'm cooking, to add what I'm eating after it's cooked. So we'll just do, I'm thinking like 1 onion. Actually, yeah. We'll look at the ratio. Either 1 or 2 onions, a whole pretty decent sized head of cabbage, and, you know, maybe like a tablespoon of garlic powder. And yes, weigh the onions too. The only thing I don't really count in the weight of the salt is the spices, because it's such a small amount as far as the ratio of the ingredients. And like I said, I usually go a little bit on the higher side, so that minuscule amount of spices is going to just be absorbed in that extra. Take off the outer several leaves and set aside, don't throw away. More often than not, I'm in the mood for something with heat to it. That's why I'm making more of this than I am of the other ones. Okay, 1773, so call it Call it 1,800 grams. 1% of that is 18. 2% of that is what? 36? 32. 36. 36 grams. We'll call it 36 grams. You just kind of knead it like, you can knead it like you knead bread if you want. Just enough to massage the salt into the cell walls of your vegetables. If you don't have a scale, you can mix everything up, go on the lighter side. I'd say like start out at like a tablespoon per small head of cabbage and adjust from there. But basically you just, once it's all mixed and massaged and you're ready to put the towel on it, taste it. Does it taste like a potato chip? It should be a little salty. We have a pretty hefty amount of cabbage here, so I'm gonna go with, this is probably too much, but like a tablespoon. I like my garlic. And remember, with spices, it does intensify with time. Just like when you're canning, you know, it just sits there in the spice and the spiciness of the spice comes out. So the pepper, I'm not so worried about. I like pepper. I like the heat. I wish I had a jalapeno, but I don't. So I'm gonna do the same thing with this one, but since we're kind of making this up as we go, once this is set for a couple of hours, I'm gonna taste it because the spices will kind of have permeated enough for me to be able to tell if I want to add any more of like the garlic or the red pepper to it, or maybe I want to add some cayenne. I'm gonna add some cayenne. Never mind. I'm gonna add some hot chipotle. I like a tablespoon. It sounds interesting to have that little bit of a smoky pepper flavor to it. I think that'll be really good. So at any rate, once this has set for a couple of hours, the spices will kind of have permeated a little better, and it's easier to get a more accurate idea of if you need to add more spices. So remember, you can always add more. You can't really take it away, so go on the lighter side. If you don't have a high tolerance for heat especially, go on the lighter side. Good choice. All right, so I'm just gonna clean all this stuff up. Oh, with the outer leaves, just for the several hours that it's setting for, I usually just throw it inside of the bowl with the rest of it, just because. And I'm just gonna clean all this stuff up, and then we'll get started on the next one. We got we have two left. Next up, Timothy needs some love. So we're gonna change it out. And I've just been keeping it in this jar. Don't pop the hooch here. I am an absolutely horrible example of how to keep a sourdough starter because I just keep freaking forgetting about it. So we're just gonna go ahead, do like 100 grams. Let's go with 125. Then I add in 125 grams of water. It's probably too much for this container, but whatever. That was a really weird angle. I don't know why I always end up defaulting to it. It's so hard to get a good camera angle in this kitchen. And then I just add enough flour to make it into the consistency that I am striving for. This is too much for this jar. Oh well. Wipe it down. Transfer the rubber band. And the cloth. Timothy's ready for another day. I have a jar of discard. This is a half-gallon jar. It's almost full, so I need to do something with it. I'm thinking I'm gonna make a Dutch baby because the Dutch baby, I think it goes through 2 cups of this. So we'll be able to empty out a fair amount of it just by doing a Dutch baby. And my hens have started laying again, so I have eggs. I did not have them until pretty recently. So anyways, that is not in this video. Last one looks very similar, but it is not. It is milk kefir. So in the last video you guys saw, I was making, I don't think it was this batch. I think it was the batch prior, but at any rate, it's doing great. It has come back. It makes kefir very quickly in one day. So I have the right amount of kefir grains in here, and it just makes delicious kefir. This is actually a 2-day one. I looked at it many times and made the unconscious but yet still conscious decision to not change it out because I didn't have milk in my fridge. Some newer fermenters tend to be a little bit confused. I should not have the sourdough stuff near it. Hang on. It's a little bit confusing for newer fermenters when it comes to metal versus not metal, and any low quality metal you really want to avoid, especially aluminum. Aluminum is reactive. It will kill the grains and it will leach out the toxins. The ferment will leach out the toxins from the aluminum. Bad all the way around. Don't even let it touch aluminum. This is stainless steel. Stainless steel is a non-reactive metal, and from all of the things that I'm aware of, stainless steel is perfectly safe. And I use this. It's made out of nylon, and it's just, you know, this is made. I don't know if it looks metal, but it's not metal. It is nylon or something like that. But anyways, it's not metal. So this is just kind of a daily routine for me. It should be a daily routine for me. I need to get back to where it was a daily routine for me. And I just like to have, you know, like 3 cups or so of kefir. Hold, please. And you can see it's nice and thick. It's just like a, you know, a thick yogurt. It'll be a lot thinner once I strain it through. It's super good for you. It's delicious. It's like the most powerful probiotic on planet Earth. At least last time I looked it up. So, you know, it's just really good. And I use local, organic, raw, grass-fed milk, which makes it even better. So that's all I do. I just kind of swish it back and forth. And don't worry, the grains will stay in the mesh strainer. You don't need to worry about that. I do tend to use the same jar to ferment in, you know, a few times. And then, you know, I just change it out when it gets kind of cruddy around the rims. But there's no reason to change out the jar every single day. So you can see the grains, they just stay there. They don't fall through the mesh. So you don't need to worry about that. You know, you want to make sure you're having a nice fine strainer because sometimes the grains are a little bit on the smaller side. So especially the newer, more vigorous, healthy ones can slip through a larger mesh. But, you know, just the standard mesh that you can purchase just about anywhere. I haven't had an issue with. There we go. Cover it with our plastic lid. Cover it with the plastic lid because I don't know what the metal is that's in typical canning lids and rings, so I use plastic instead because it's non-reactive. I should maybe think about picking up some stainless steel lids, but as of yet I haven't done that. So. Anyways, this is ready to go. And then this one is just gonna go for a second ferment. I tend to use a metal lid for this one because there's no grains in here. I have a little cubby right here. It's right over here. And that's just my kefir corner. I just keep my kefir there. My sourdough starter, I keep over there by my coffee pot. It's more than 8 feet away, so it's safe. They won't swap cultures. And then my vegetable ferments, I usually keep them somewhere else. Just kind of randomly, wherever I stash them, that's where they end up. This last one with the beet kraut, it's just kind of stayed on the counter and that's where it's been. So anyways, I'm gonna make up some kefir that I made yesterday. And then I'll bring you back this evening when we're ready to jar up the sauerkrauts. Probably gonna be dark by then, so the lighting's gonna be awful, but such is life. Couple days later, all of our ferments are active ferments. I can tell because you can see all of the little bubbles that are popping up in the bottom of the pan. It has started to push the brine out of the jar. And you can see in this jar, this is where the level of the ferment was. That's a huge gap in there. And I filled that gap with a Ziploc filled with brine. Very important to fill it with brine instead of water. If you fill it with brine and your bag leaks, you're gonna compromise the salt level inside of your brine. So very important, if you're gonna put a Ziploc bag in there, that's a way to eliminate the oxygen as well as a way to hold everything underneath the brine. It's kind of like a really simple, quick weight. And then this one also, I used a Ziploc bag, but I made sure not to fill it up too full because you can see the jar is much fuller. It's to about here. Both of these I filled later in the evening. It was terrible lighting. So I did film it, but I just kind of filmed myself doing it. Oh, you can see the little air bubbles. I'm not sure if you can see the air bubbles in this one. Oh, there we go. Focused. You can see the air bubbles that are in here. Oh, it's starting to release some of the pressure. I don't use these Fido style jars with the flip top lids terribly often these days. I used to use them all the time, and they're a fantastic thing to use because they hold the pressure. Let me see, I don't know how to put this. They hold a nice tight seal, but when the pressure builds up inside of the jar, it auto burps. So like these ones, there might be a little bit of a hiss that comes out if I were to pop it, but not much typically. You can see a little bit popped out, but it will build up enough of pressure inside of here, but it won't build up to the point that the jar is going to explode. And honestly, the explosions aren't really a risk with a lacto fermented vegetable. It's more like the lid will pop off, and that just makes a huge mess. And then the last one, this is the spicy one that we came up with together. I put it in a water sealed crock with a weight inside of there. Also, when you fill up the rim of a water sealed crock, it's a really good idea to use also a salt brine. 1 tablespoon per pint of water is a really quick and simple way to make up a brine with the correct ratio, but that only works if you're using a brine. It doesn't work with something like this. You kind of need to weigh it. But with this, I fill up the moat with a salt brine for several reasons. It reduces the evaporation. It still happens, but you don't have to check it quite as often, or you don't have to be concerned about it as much. You just come along every couple days, look on there, see if you need to fill it up, and then top it off if you do. When I make up the original brine, there's usually some leftovers, so I'll just pop it in the fridge, and I just know that I have it on reserve if I need it. So all of these ferments, I'm gonna go ahead and let them go for about 3 weeks to a month, and then they're gonna be ready to consume. If you like things to be fermented on the lesser side, you don't like things just yet to be quite as acidic, you can go on the lighter side, and no harm is gonna come from it. Just the longer you go, up to about 3 weeks, that's kind of when it reaches the peak level as far as acids and the bacterial level and things like that. Any time less than 3 weeks, and that time is variable depending on a lot of different factors, mostly including the temperature of your home, but roughly 3 weeks is a pretty good estimate. Anytime prior to that, it's not bad. No harm will come to you, but if you just don't like things to be a little quite as acidic, pull it sooner. It just won't have quite the bacterial content as if you let it go for 3 weeks. As far as the milk kefir goes, I wanted to insert a couple of different frequently asked questions. In my last video, you guys saw that I'd made milk kefir, and I had a lot of different questions and or confusions about the milk kefir. Milk kefir, while it is a similar in appearance product to clabbered milk, and that's where you just take raw milk and you put a lid on it and you leave it on the counter and let nature take its course. It's a very similar process, but by adding in the milk kefir grains, which are an heirloom culture, it is not something that you can just grow out of milk, at least not to my knowledge. It is something that is passed down from person to person or sold from one person to another person. The culture itself, those little gummy bear, cauliflower looking things, they are something that you do have to acquire in order to make specifically milk kefir. You can make clabbered milk if you have raw milk, but in order to turn it into kefir, you do have to have those grains. The place that I get my cultures from, typically where I got these particular grains, is from Etsy. I like Etsy because you're supporting people, you're supporting human beings instead of some giant conglomerate. You can search for the type of milk that you want to use. For me, I punched in there raw cow's milk kefir grains, and then I was able to search through all the listings. I can read through a bunch of different reviews to make sure that it's a good quality product, it's a good seller. And if I have any further questions, I can message the seller directly and they will get back to me and answer my questions. So if you're interested in buying kefir grains, I don't sell them currently, but look at Etsy and you'll find some great products on there. So I hope you guys were able to see, with just the swapping out of a few different spices and just being a little bit creative, you can come up with a ton of different recipes. All 3 of these sauerkrauts are going to taste completely different. They're all going to lend very different flavors to whatever recipes I decide to add them to. I usually keep things very, very simple. I like to just cook up some meat, like some hamburger meat or pork chops or something like that, and then I will just add whatever fermented food I want to have on the side. If I like the pairing with it, then I'll just dump the bowl of it on top of there, and it's just delicious. And that's usually how I enjoy my fermented foods. I like to keep things simple. Be sure you guys are staying tuned because I'm definitely going to keep you posted on how these recipes taste. 2 of these recipes I've never had before. 1 I basically have. We just kind of tweaked it a little bit, but it'll taste pretty much the same. So hopefully these will all be good, something that I'm going to be able to enjoy and something that you guys can enjoy as well. And the purpose of this video, I kind of wanted to demonstrate to you guys that whatever you have on hand, as long as it's good fresh produce, you can make any ferment that you want to. They're all going to taste different. Some will be good, some of them you might not enjoy as much, but there's no reason that you can't experiment and just kind of make things up. In the beginning, I know it's good to follow a recipe. You kind of want to have that confirmation that what you're making is going to be good. But once you get past the beginning, you start to get a little bit more confident in the flavors that you're going to be combining. Feel free to take it into your own hands and make whatever you want with whatever you have. If you want a more in-depth look into fermenting sauerkraut, the safety behind it, and how to do it, be sure to check out this video right here. It gives you all the information that you need if you're a beginner just trying to get started. So, peace out, sauerkraut.